very much a theme today that's establishing. I wasn't aware that it was going to happen. But our next speaker comes from what I think is one of the most data-driven companies that I know of. And a lot of it comes from their actual product itself. So when I first saw the platform at Saxo Bank, I think this is the poster child of data-driven platforms, real-time insights in the market. And one of the interesting, I don't want to ruin his presentation, I don't know if he will be talking about this. One of the really interesting things I found is that in a data-driven platform, that there are regulations and legislations around giving advice, whether that's driven via machine learning, on making stock purchases. And I just found as a really kind of odd thing you would never think about in a data-driven world. I would like to make suggestions on which stocks you should buy and when, and they have a lot of that data, but the liabilities associated with that make it an interesting topic. Now, the theme that I'm talking about is that our next speaker, he does the worst accent of an Australian. Every time I see him, and I certainly hope he does not try it out for everyone's sake today. Please welcome Birger Ziska to the stage from Saxo Bank. There you go. That big green button is go forward.
So, hello everyone. Australian accent. Yeah, well, I'm trying. So yes, I should say that. Oops, I'm jumping the gun here. So yes, my name is Birger Ziska. I work for Saxo Bank. I am in the data engineering and technology organization. So we dabble a little bit in on data. So how do I turn this auto shuffle off? Or I'll just have to try to keep up. So yeah. Who we are, I mean, Saxo Bank is all about democratizing trading and investment and providing unparalleled access to global financial markets anytime, anywhere. I mean, from your desktop or even to your mobile. So what do we have? I mean, we have global multi-asset, meaning we have multiple products in one platform in multiple accounts. That's a truly unique offering for you. We give you access to some 35,000 plus instruments, tradable instruments, and a whole suite of liquidity providers. And we are actually able to give you real-time analysis and marketing and news feeds. So above all, we are a facilitator, as Tim alluded to, right? We cannot do your trading for you. It's a thou shalt not. So we're a facilitator. We have global presence. We have customers in over 170 countries. But we also do business with white labels and institutional clients. A little bit in summary. So we have a truly scalable platform for traders and investors and wholesale clients. We have here a technology stack and a business process that gives you access to financial markets worldwide. And we have our Saxo Trader Pro, which is for our professional traders, and our standard offering, which is our Saxo Trader Go, that you can use on your mobile or your laptop. And then we also have APIs for our VLCs and institutional clients. So with that in mind, I want to kind of like dive into this question, what does it mean to be data-driven? I mean, we've been hearing buzzwords here and there. I want to try to bring it down a little bit because we're here as people trying to deal with this issue. I have a book here called Creating a Data-Driven Organization by Carl Anderson. I will recommend it as a good read to get started with actually understanding what it means to be data-driven. So he has a quote in his chapter 1 that says that data-drivenness is about building tools, abilities, and most crucially, a culture that acts on data. Now, we've heard about culture. I would also emphasize that it's the fact that we're actually acting on the data, because sometimes we have all the tools, we have all the data right at our fingertips, but do we take action on it? Do we trust it? That has been some of the conundrums, right? We have all this machine learning, AIs, and all these tools that do all this amazing stuff for us, but do we trust it? There's a kind of personal barrier that we sometimes need to overcome as people. And that is one of the challenges, I think. And also, it also starts with what's called data literacy. Do you understand what this data means? That's the first thing, because we've heard very aptly that it requires a strategy from the C-level. And I completely agree with that. It has to start there. It has to be something that starts at the C-level and then trickles down the organization. But it's that trickling down of the organization to make sure that you have the right people who understand your data and are able and empowered to actually act on it. So it's not a binary question, are we data-driven? Maybe it's more of a question of to what degree, because all of us look at data and act on it, right? We see our tax returns, we're not happy about it, we act on it. But I think we can all agree that everybody of us is at some stage, some level where we can actually ask to ourselves, what do I need to do in order to become more data-driven? And that's, I think, we're all at a different place, and we have different choices to make. And in Saxo Bank, we like to think that by giving you all this access, all this information, and actually giving you the power to make the best possible trade right at your fingertip, just by pressing a button. Well, we're there, done, talk done. Oh, sorry, okay. I'll continue a little bit more. So I want to share with you this data, information, knowledge, and wisdom pyramid, because bringing it down to what do we do when we talk about becoming data-driven. And we've heard so much about data. Our bits and bytes, our numbers, our video feeds, audio logs, what have you. And we've heard it being a liability. We've heard it being an asset. Some say data is the new oil. You can actually profit from it. I would actually call, in terms of data-drivenness, I find it to be the lifeblood of your data-driven organization. That's also why we want to keep it clean. But data in itself doesn't tell very much of a story, so we know that already. So the first thing we need to do is start extracting information from our data. Longitude and latitude, unless you're trekking a lot or been sailing the seas for a long period of time, longitude and latitude won't mean much to you unless you start putting it on a map. So that's one way of putting it in, taking information out of your data. Your chart of accounts can tell you all these millions of transactions that you have. You put it in your chart of account, and you know how your business is doing. But that's only going so far. Now we know what the data means. But going up to knowledge, we need to now start to make some claims about what can we know with all this information. What do we actually know? How are these things linked together? How do they interact with each other? Are we on target? We can distill more information and gain valuable insights. And then we can come up to the topmost level of the pyramid, where we actually start talking about learning. What do we know? Do we understand what this means? Are we on the right track? Do we have the right deals? Are we being profitable? So we've been hearing a little bit about airplanes. There's a lot of information or data flowing around in an airplane and surrounding systems. But from a human being, we have no way of interpreting it. I know if a plane flies, a good sign, right? If it doesn't fly, well, maybe it hasn't just taken off yet. But everything else, we happily leave to the machines, right? Because we also don't want to be flying on a plane where that depends too much on how a pilot's feeling. We have checks and we have all sorts of controls to ensure that we have a safe flight, that we can actually feel safe. So that's just one of the things that's the kind of abstraction where we start to get some impulses. What do I need to do next? What have I learned? So it's basically just a big way of aggregating our data that makes us better able to actually act and learn. And basically, from my point of view, what I say being data-driven is more about where is it that you're focusing your time as a person, right? The more we can leave this part to the machines and the more time we can spend up here, the better off we are. If you're spending your time shuffling through your data, figuring out how to integrate it best possibly, right? Well, at some point, yes, you're data-driven, but it's just too slow, right? Time is essence. And so I like to think that up here is kind of like the optimal place to be, right? But in reality, I think today what we have mastered is kind of like this part, the information. I think this is kind of like the gray area that we're struggling with today, all the machine learning and so on. So when we want to extract information from our data, there are kinds of questions we can ask, and I really want to boil it down to say, for instance, how many blue line squares am I looking at? You'll probably say 1. If you're philosophically inclined, you might say there are 2 with some level of precision. But anyway, every which way, you have all the data, it's right there in front of you. But let's look at a different scenario. How many blue line squares do I have? Right? If you want to be really cynical about it, there are none. There are bits and pieces that kind of looks like a square. You can say, is this, I don't see that fourth corner forming, so I'm not so sure. But over here, I can gather some confidence that this actually looks like a square. And so this is actually the Gestalt principle of closure, where we have bits and pieces, but our mind projects that this is actually a square. And then I can tease you a little bit by throwing this thing in there and say, is this still, or is this just noise? So this is kind of like the challenges we're dealing with. So I call this the classical problem, where you have the data, it's just a matter of precision. And here is more a problem that, do I have all the data I need in order to get the right information? And this is kind of like our evolving area, whereas this one we have solved pretty well, I find. So, classic question. What was your company's revenue last year? I mean, that one we've solved. And if I now start to ask, who is Berger Siska? You know, which one? But actually, it's kind of a bad example, because if you Google, if both Google and Bing kind of agree, there's only one. It's not because it's the same kind of one if you search Steve Jobs. I wish, but it's not the case. Let's take a more common example, say Anna Jensen. In Denmark, Anna and Jensen, very common first and last names. So you might ask, so which one? Well, what's the problem here? I don't have enough data in front of me to actually make a judgment on who Anna Jensen is, so I don't know. If we go totally off the rails, is now a good time to buy Tesla shares? I can't find that in my data. Something else needs to happen. Or, what PII data do we have, and where is it? Now I'm actually asking a question about data I don't know whether I have or not. But I think this is a very relevant question that we start asking in 2017, and as we saw in 2018, a big focus. And this is actually where the story of Saxo Bank and CluedIn begins. I'll get back to that in a second. So, one way to start getting information out of your data is that you select some data sources. You want to define some descriptive ways of getting information out of your data. Repeated questions that you can run over and over again every day to get updated reports and dashboards. Get a 360 view of how your business is doing. And the tools we use to do this is typically our data warehouse or analytical processing technologies. We've been doing this for years, and it works pretty well. But the problem here is that we selected our data. We chose which ones we wanted to massage, integrate, and model. That leaves us with the question, what else data do I have? Could it be valuable? And if you look at person data, there might be some bits and pieces that we're missing. I alluded before that knowing who Anna Jensen is, there's some bits and pieces missing before I actually can tell you who that is. So now we turn the arrow downwards. We wanted to go discover. What else data do I have? And we've all heard about this massive pile of data we have stored here, there, and everywhere. How do we actually access it? How do we find it? and how do we index it, right? I mean, databases, sure. File systems, emails. You know, Bill Inman, the father of data warehousing, spends his time now actually working on this unstructured problem. Because that is still, we have tools, but there's still a lot to be done there in that area. So we can even also go into www and actually find more information about some of our data. Enrich our current data. So we can search. We can open up our browser, go to Google or Bing, whatever is your favorite, and actually look for it. We can open email and start searching, and so on. Our file system, we could do some grep commands, whatever you fancy. You'll find the data somehow, but is this efficient, right? This is again the question of, you will find the data if you really want to, but are you being efficient at it? So this is kind of where we saw CluedIn come in. Because actually, we were kind of investigating how do we go beyond this warehousing. And we recently had this case study with the Panama Papers, crunching, 11.5 million documents and into a graph database, and then they did some graph analysis, and whoop-de-doo, that's all the mystery. That's oversimplified, but it kind of like gives the message there are other ways of analyzing your data than we usually do. So we went to a conference hosted by Neo4j, and there's this Australian coming up with a beautiful accent that I can't mimic, start talking about how they can solve our GDPR problem for us. Really? Well, I thought it was worth a POC, so we invited them over. We lumped some data at them and say, have at it. So not only did they find all our PI data in various databases, our CRM database and our file system, they were able to enrich it. They were able to link it together and actually say, this is how it's connected. Oh, and by the way, they have the nerve to come into my house and talk about my data quality. And see, that's the personal barrier that we have, right? You know, everybody comes and talks about your system, you have some flaws in your data. No, the system works. How can you claim there's flaws in your data? That's because we're actually starting to put data into use in other ways that we didn't do before. So this is where the barrier that we have, you know, sometimes we have to swallow our pride and just accept this is what data tells us. We have to accept it for a fact and then start to work from there. But I'm very sensitive about that is not just going to happen from day one. So if we start moving up, the font broke a little bit. If we want to now start to gain some knowledge from the information that we have the data, we are able to ask questions of it. Now we want to kind of say, well, what do we know? And I want to bring the value chain that we have in Saxo Bank, which is basically acquisition. The first time you actually enter our website, you maybe sign up for a demo account, which I highly recommend you do if you want to play around with our trading platform. It's free, we give you some trading money, and you can play around in a simulated environment. We have onboarding. It's when you actually start asking for an account that you can fund and trade with. And then you will go to become an active trader, hopefully. And then at some point it happens that people lose interest, they stop trading, and they might leave. I want to focus on the first three ones in the next couple of slides, and let's dive into acquisition. So let's say X is a lead. That's you or anyone else who signs up on our website. We would like to know a little bit about the quality of that lead. We saw the example Tim gave us earlier, the lead quality score. We actually have that too, something our data scientists have worked on for us. So they're kind of a model where they can actually score a lead. So just an example, it's more sophisticated than this, of course, but if we have Helsing at zombieapocalypse.omg, or we have Mark at largehedgefund.com. Given that we're in an investment bank, Mark looks pretty more interesting from our point of view, at least. So he might get a higher score than the previous one. We also want to know a little bit about the expected funding that this client will bring into his account. And then, not least, we want to estimate how much return of funding we can expect from this client. Now, putting this all together, we get a lead value score, right? We want to have high quality lead based on the information we get. And we also want to have, well, the one that brings most money to the company. And we do that in order to be able to create a win-win, so we focus our attention on the right clients that will bring us the right, or the most amount of money, of course. So another thing they did was that taking some of this information, they produced a map. And this is again where we started to look outside. And where did this client log into our trading platform? What did they do? How long did they stay? And so on. And then we actually took some of the information that they typed in, and now our leads are situated here. The size, is indicating how much funding they're expected to bring in. And the color, forgive me, but I can't remember if dark is thumbs up or down. But at least we could say something about how much funding they're expected to bring in and what's the quality of the leads that we get in their various regions. Now, what can we use this for? Where do we target our marketing campaigns? And we get that just by sitting back, letting the machine work for us, produce this output and say, well, UK looks good. If we move on to onboarding, so when we actually start having you funding or asking for an account, we want to do some due diligence. We are a regulated bank after all. So this is all about looking at the data that we get in, some validation. Because again, the cleaner data we have, the smoother the remaining process will be. So this is kind of simplified because this will vary from region to region. Different countries, different laws, etc. But we definitely want to have a look at your data quality such that we can also produce a proper risk calculation. Are you a high-risk client? Do you like to take big chances, right? If you fail, it can also reflect back on us. We need to do some document validation. This is where you submit your proof of identity. And then we do AML screening, Given the recent event with Danske Bank, it's a really bad place to be, so this is super important. And if all of that goes through, you're onboarded. Now, back in the days, this usually took about 30 minutes. It was a manual-driven process. On a good day, 30 minutes. If something went wrong, a little bit more. But from a single client, this might not be a problem. Right? I mean, I'm pretty sure we've signed up for services and they'll say, well, we'll get back to you within the next 24 hours. And we think that's fine. But we also talked about that we do business with white label clients. Now, if we have a white label client that, say, brings in 1,000 traders that want to do business with us, not so good. This doesn't scale. So the only way to get around this is, of course, to hire more people. And that's not a good model if this is kind of coming in bursts. So what do? I mean, we created a digital onboarding team that, using some robotics and some APIs, we're able to bring this down to 5 minutes. It looks better. And the ambition is that maybe we can bring in some more of his friends and maybe get it down to seconds. So we're not done yet. Now, let's say you have an account and you actually start doing some trades. We want to be able to service you in the best possible way when you start trading. This is a sensitive issue. You can gain a lot of money. You can also lose a lot of money. So you also have to be able to service you to put you in the best position possible. And so we have 2 segments that I want to focus on here that I mentioned in the start. We have traders and investors. And we've kind of know that traders and investors, they have different behaviors. And not surprisingly, we also put them in different client segments. So what we did was that we added a feature tracking to our trading platform, such that whenever you click around and the actions you take when you're logged on, we log those, and then we're able to do some analysis. And we are able to split it up into segments and do behavioral analysis. So I want to explain these charts here, of course. So basically what this is the dots are the features that are being used. And I'm sure it's small, you might not be able to see it, but I'll highlight some of the things that I want to focus on. So on the x-axis, you have percentage of users within that segment using whatever features. And on the y-axis, we have average time spent in minutes. And the size of the dots is how many times you use this feature. And you'll notice, or might not notice, that there's a difference in the y-axis. So there's something we need to look at is that if you look at up here, it goes to 6 minutes. Up here, we go to 25 minutes. So this bar over here roughly corresponds to the 6 minute up here, right? So that would be sitting up here if you want to compare these charts. I apologize for the chart junk, but this is what I came up with in the last minute here. So does anyone care to guess which segment is which here? Anyone? Okay. I can say that we have some performance overview, instrument finder, and we have all of these multitude of features here, which are called trade ticket, positions, closing positions, orders. No? Okay. This looks to be kind of like short and selective, right? So we have shorter sessions, fewer features that we use. Here we are spending more time, and we use much more diverse features. No? Okay, I can tell you that this is a typical investor, and this is a typical trader. And I want to kind of like, for me, what sticks out here is that the instrument finder and the performance overview. Performance overview basically means you go in and you want to check how an instrument has been traded and how it has been forming over a period of time. And the instrument finder is kind of like a guided click-through where you start exploring what instruments are there. As opposed to some of the traders, you see the trade ticket, meaning the trade ticket is something you have on your instrument, you open it up, and now you're able to see the ticks real time, and you're able to do buy or sell, and you can get exactly that price when you click. So you want to be ready to click and either buy or sell an instrument. So that's a typical trader pattern, whereas investors are a little bit more laid back. They want to, they're long term. They trade less, but they really want to closely monitor how their portfolio is doing. So with that in mind, we came up with the idea that we wanted to bring a new platform onto the market, tailored for investors. And this is a story of how we actually use data to kind of like identify what are the features we should be emphasizing in this new product. So just to give a little bit more comparison, so the patterns we saw was that traders that tend to log in, they research. There's a search button in a trading platform, so you can search for instruments. Traders typically know what they want to trade. So they look for it, get some information on it, they do the research. We have news feeds right at your screen, so you can actually dig into and actually see, it's now, again, going back to, it's now a good time to buy Tesla shares. Well, have at it. We can give you all the information, I just can't tell you. Investors tend to log in, check their portfolio, check performance of various instruments, and then they log out again. So very different use patterns. And then some other conclusions that we were able to draw is that traders tend to use 8-minute sessions on average, investors use 3-minute sessions on average. They log in frequently, log in less frequently. They search instruments, which is one of what I highlight here, whereas investors, they tend to explore instruments. Traders use many features, investors use selected features. So with that in mind, I'll give you a little bit of a sneak preview of the new investor platform, which is here on the left. And this is our standard offering, the Saxo Trader Go, that we have already today. So the investor platform here is going to be launched officially here in Denmark on November 21st. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Traders love that. As you can see, the search is up here, but if you press the drop down, you'll actually be able to navigate through some of the instruments that we have. So again, we have here two simple views on a website. One is called Portfolio, where you get a nice aggregated view of your portfolio, your instruments, how you're doing. And on markets, you don't have a search, but you do have kind of like this click-through. Well, I want to check bonds. And then I click there, and then I get guided through what bonds we offer. But look at this, right? How's this not data-driven? But again, it's us trying to make you data-driven. So we also want to look into ourselves. In order to improve this, we also have to become more data-driven. So that's kind of our journey that we are still trying to, improve. So how far are we? How data-driven are we? I'll just say that what we want to do is to be able to take care of our clients responsibly by giving them the right data at the right time in order to help them make this better decisions than ever before. And in order to do that, of course, we have to become more data-driven. That's the only way to actually improve on that score. So what? And here's one of the examples where we empower you, where we say, here's a selected instrument, and we're able to identify a channel up. This pattern is still being in process of form, so this is not done forming, but we do predict that there are possible bullish prices moving towards a resistance within the next 47 days. And then, of course, you're tempted to ask, so what do I do? Do I buy? Do I sell? Do I lay back? Again, I can't tell you. But I am giving you everything you need in order to make the best decision possible. To take responsibility of your financial destiny, to make you informed. Again, democratizing is all about making the people informed, and we try desperately to help you in that area. Where does that put us? Here? I don't know. But up there, I'd say. We've come pretty far. And we heard all about this AI, machine learning, and robotics that are going to come over and take over the world and kick us out. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But I do want to leave you with a little aside. I don't know if you know this guy. He's called Daniel Dennett. He's done a lot of research on nature of consciousness. And consciousness is something also that gets conflated when we're talking AI. Some people call it the soul. And he was once interviewed by a philosopher of science and journalist in Italy named Giulio Giorello. If my Australian was bad, I apologize for my Italian. It's probably not good either. But he worked for a newspaper called Corriere della Sera. And how the interview go, I don't know, but the article wrote that sì, abbiamo un'anima, ma è fatta di tanti piccoli robot. It translates to, yes, we have a soul, but it's made up of lots of tiny robots. So, with some food for thought, I'll just say thank you.
You actually had many questions.
Huh?
You actually had many questions. Can I ask one of them?
Sure.
Pick a number between 1 and I think it was 4 of questions.
1 of 4.
Yeah.
3. 3 is a good number,
Oh.
yeah. Danish?
It's all good. Why?
You have Burger
You're doing this on... It's okay.
You can use Burger Translate.
So, I think I get this one because it's there's all technical words littered throughout. Actually, I think this is a good one. So this came in 2 minutes ago, so it's probably to do with the screenshot of the black screen with all the data on it.
Yeah.
With that, what happens when your system is having problems? They use the word SLA. Do you? So I'm going to extrapolate. Do you have? In such a data-driven application, what happens when it's down? What, like is that just an impossible thing to happen at Saxo Bank, and there's so much infrastructure that needs to be put in? Because I can imagine the right data at the right time can make the decision between quite a lot of money.
Of course, I'll have to hedge by saying, of course, there are only so many nines we could put into it. And I'm not sure exactly how many nines we're up at.
Okay.
But definitely, if the system is down and you don't get these updates, we also want to protect you so you don't make wrong trades.
Okay.
So there are systems in place to actually take post-action, either to stop a trade, do stop out if it turns out to be wrong, and so on.
Got it. Makes sense. Good question. Can everyone give Birger another hand of the round? Thank you. I think we've all earned a decent break. So we'll start again in 15 minutes. We have Google, we have Egmont, and we have Implement when we come back. I'll see you all in 15 minutes.